Uh-oh.
Up in her last two fights. Good way hitting him from that way down.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The latest from out of the women's bantamweight division. Former WBA bantamweight champion Nina Hughes has officially activated a rematch clause, and she's waiting on approval from the WBA for the fight to move forward. Questions that need answers. Where would this rematch take place? Because I don't think Nina wants to go back to Australia. I would think she wants it at a neutral location.
Potential sites for the fight.
Lou DiBella don't do shows in the United Kingdom, and while he might be in association with some shows in Australia,
He ain't the one financing those fights.
he's not the one paying for them. The Shernika Johnson versus Nina Hughes fight, the first one, was in association with Foxtel, was in association with Top Rank. That's where the money to do that entire card came from, not from Lou.
Then what do they need him for?
The network connections. He's got the network connections to Top Rank to get a Johnson versus Hughes fight on the undercard of a Top Rank show. That's what they need him for, even though the money isn't coming from him. Now the question is, if you want to do a second fight and you want to do a rematch, but you don't want to do it in Australia, where do you do it?
America, maybe?
Maybe, because Lou DiBella don't do shows in the UK, and the shows in Australia, he's not the one paying for them. Not that Nina Hughes wants to go back to Australia anyway, so I'd wager that if there is going to be a second fight, maybe it'll be in America. The second question is, how long will it take to make? Because Nina's already up there in age. The longer it takes to make, the more it favors Shernika.
I picked Shernika Johnson to win the first fight. I'm leaning towards her to win the second because I don't see what adjustments Nina can make.
And the longer the rematch takes to make, the more it favors Shernika because Nina's up there in age. So what are we looking at? A summer rematch? Fall? Winter?
When does it happen?
Where does it happen? It all matters to Nina Hughes because for her, time is of the essence, more so than it is for Shernika Johnson. Rematches are often won by the fighter who can change, the fighter who can make the most adjustments, take what they learned and what they experienced in the first fight and adapt to it, come up with a better strategy. I don't think that's Nina. I think Nina, at her very best, is a mid-range to inside combination puncher, a strong one,
But she has her limitations.
not exclusive to her age, but her size as well. That Nina Hughes is on the smaller, much smaller end of the spectrum as far as bantamweight fighters go. She ain't got much height, she ain't got much reach.
Doesn't have the fastest feet.
That what lost her the first fight would likely still cost her the second, because Shernika is actually the one who's more adaptable. Taller, longer, she can fight on the front foot, she can fight on the back foot, fight moving lateral, she can change.
She did.
She didn't fight Nina Hughes the way she fought, say, Shannon O'Connell. She did a lot more boxing and moving in the O'Connell fight, countering in the O'Connell fight than she did in the Hughes fight. In the Hughes fight, she had more of a bully style, coming forward behind that high guard, shooting that jab,
Down the middle.
backing off Nina Hughes, bullying Nina Hughes, overpowering her.
I just don't see Nina being able to adapt to everything that Shernika Johnson brings to the table. Shernika will likely fight an even better version of the fight that she just fought in a rematch.
Because where Nina Hughes has got to try to figure out a plan, a strategy that will actually work, Shernika Johnson just has to build upon what already worked. More of it, more aggression.
What luxuries and perks her natural size and speed afford her.
And strength. Shernika Johnson used to campaign up there at 122. She's very strong now at 118.
More experienced in the pros than Nina, more fights, more rounds in the bank, and she's been in there with some dogs, some tough broads. Shannon O'Connell, Ali Scottney, Susie Q, Susie Ramadan.
Alyssa Esquivel. I do not see Nina Hughes winning a rematch, irrespective of when and where it happens. United Kingdom, United States, here, there, later.
I think Shernika beats her in a rematch, I do.
I think that at this point, Nina Hughes' best bet to get back in the winner's bracket and become a champion again at bantamweight would be facing Japan's own Miyo Yoshida, reigning IBF champion. I would give Nina better odds against Miyo than Shernika in a rematch.
Shernika beats her again.
She's activated her rematch clause, and that's all well and good, but I remember that Lawrence Okoli activated his rematch clause with Chris Billum-Smith. In the end, that rematch didn't happen.
So I don't know for sure that this one will, but we'll see. If it does, I've got Shernika.
Elsewhere in the world of boxing, a ray of light, an array of hope for the sinking ship that is the PBC per Boxing Insider Rick Glacier. Possible good news for Al Heyman's failing PBC. They're currently in talks with a very strong investor to refinance PBC with fresh money. But the question is, how much control will Heyman have if a new investor comes in and saves the sinking ship known as the PBC? The investor is as serious as a heart attack. Myself, I wouldn't advise anyone to put a dime into that horribly run company with a totally antiquated dinosaur business model. Stay tuned.
Who could the investor be?
Maybe it's Turkey Al-Sheikh. He very much has an interest in revitalizing the sport of boxing and bringing it back to the forefront of the sporting world. Could be him. Could be Netflix, who is staging the upcoming Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight. They seem to have a fleeting interest. Or what about Peacock? Very recently, Peacock bought the rights, the U.S. rights, to all of Boxer's shows in the UK, that if you want to see those shows and you're in the US, you can watch them on Peacock. Who the investor is isn't really important right now. The question is, the real one, is whether or not it's too late.
What?
You come in with pockets turned out, your big old wallet, to start spending money to do more PBC shows. But what will those shows consist of when so many fighters have already left? What is left? An aging Erislandy Lara, a virtually unknown Carlos Adames.
What?
Don't let David Benavidez lose his next fight to Alexander Vazdik. The Vazdik fight is right around the corner, and if David loses that thing, that's a critical hit to what the PBC has left. An even more critical hit would be if Gervonta Davis loses. Loses to Frank Martin?
They cannot afford any surprises right now.
So, when an Emmanuel Navarrete loses to a Dennis Berenchik, it's hardly the end of the world for Top Rank. They've got more. They've got a lot more where that came from. But does the PBC?
They don't have anywhere near as many young gunners, young unbeaten up-and-comers, as Matchroom, as Top Rank, hell, even Golden Boy. Golden Boy is in the process of signing fighters where the PBC is in the process of losing them.
When you think about a benefactor, a potential financier that's willing to pull the PBC out of this rut, what you then have to ask yourself is, what is the strength of the stable? What do they have to work with?
What's the best fight the PBC can make within their own parameters, within their own borders?
That's if they take the biosphere approach. If they don't, and their fighters are so exposed to what else is out there and who else, how will they fare? If you expose an Erislandy Lara to a Yanni Bek Alimkhanalai, expose a Carlos Adames to that same fighter, do they win? And if they don't,
what then?
They've got nothing going on at heavy, nothing going on at cruiser, one or two guys that are moving up to light heavy, one or two guys left at super middle. And junior middle. Welterweight, the welterweight division, well, it ain't the stronghold for them that it used to be. Neither is 140 pounds. All they've got at 135 is Gervonta.
And Frank, who he's about to fight.
130's not one of their weight classes. 126 ain't. 122, 118. The further down you go, the less you see the PBC.
Right?
So what's the strength of the stable, and is there enough there to salvage? The second question, if a benefactor steps in with all their money and they try to finance these shows moving forward, doesn't that involve the acquiescence of power? Rick Glacier touched on it. See, when you were at Showtime, Stefan Espinoza let you have the run of the place, when in reality, he was the quality control officer.
The liaison between the network and the promoter.
What he was supposed to do was ensure that the network is getting their money's worth. That for the money they're putting up for PBC shows, they're getting that back in views. Needless to say that Stefan did a piss poor job. It seemed more and more like he was taking his marching orders from Al, where it was supposed to be the other way around. Stefan let Al Heyman have the run of the place. Bill Wenger at Fox.
That guy just didn't know any better, but they wised up quickly.
They quickly realized that they weren't getting very much from their partnership with the PBC, and it wasn't that long into the deal to where they cut the budget. They stopped spending money on that stuff.
Because they saw it wasn't bringing nothing in.
So here and now, if you get a new benefactor, somebody who's willing to pay for these PBC shows involving these PBC fighters, does that not involve the acquiescence of control? Since it's their money you're going to be relying on, that what they let you do at Fox and what they let you do at Showtime, you can't do that now.
Yeah, they're going to give you some money because they're interested in your fighters and interested in making certain fights.
Don't underestimate the PBC's ability to fuck off other people's money. Look at how much of Waddle and Reed's money they fucked off. $500 million. And that was just them getting started. They fucked off Fox's money. They fucked off Showtime's money for years.
But you can't do that anymore.
The boxing landscape was a lot more fertile than it is now. Being attached to Floyd Mayweather in those days, it meant more than it does today.
Being attached to Al Heyman, it meant more then than it does now.
In case you haven't noticed, the matchmaking has gotten a lot more ambitious the last 2 years.
You're gonna have to keep up with the Joneses.
Somebody with a lot of money wants to come in and help you out. It's not to make safe fights for your fighters, what fighters you have left.
No.
No more Danny Garcia versus Rod Salka fights. No more Deontay Wilder versus Artur Spilkas or Stavern rematches. That kind of matchmaking,
It will not suffice.
the bar of standard has been raised. And even if somebody wants to come in now and help you out and finance your fights, they're still going to want to keep a standard.
Can you meet it?
We'll see what else develops from this story. And finally, our latest set of updates to the men's Ring IQ pound for pound list. A lot has happened involving these fighters, these champions, as the Ring IQ pound for pound list is unlike other pound for pound lists in the sense that you have to be a reigning champion. You have to be in possession of a title you are currently defending and or unifying. The list is only for winners and only for champions.
Reigning champions, not former champions.
You see the vacancy on the bottom left corner left behind by Devin Haney's upset loss to Ryan Garcia, a loss that has not been overturned, not yet.
There's been a lot left to reconcile. A lot of moving parts, a lot of fights. So here's how it breaks down.
As I told you, Alexander Usyk advances to the number one spot on the Ring IQ pound for pound list. Inouye moves down to number 2. Terrence Crawford moves down to number 4.
Explain it.
I already did ahead of this weekend's fight. When you have an Inouye ranked at number 1, or a Crawford, or a Canelo ranked as the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the sport, it's symbolic, it's figurative. None of these fighters are actually up there at heavyweight, fighting heavyweights, and the original formula was,
If Sugar Ray Robinson, who was thought of as being a better fighter than the more popular heavyweights of his time, if he had the size of a heavyweight, he would beat them because he was so much more skilled than they were.
what was tantamount to a postulation, a hypothesis, though not a reality. And that applies to Inouye, that applies to Crawford and Canelo. As good and as accomplished as they are, they're not actually up there at heavyweight, fighting heavyweights, proving that their skills would overcome a heavyweight's size. Whereas with Usyk, it's a reality. It's literal. He literally proved that.
He did it.
It's not a postulation. It's not a hypothesis with him. It's a reality. He took out the 2 champions at heavyweight to become a 2-time undisputed heavyweight champion himself. None of these other fighters like Inouye or Terrence Crawford, Canelo Alvarez, any one of these other guys, they're never going to find themselves in a situation where they're outweighed by their opponent by 43 fucking pounds.
It won't happen.
Usyk proved that in spite of being older and in spite of being smaller, 223 pounds of Usyk has more skill than 266 pounds of Fury. Tyson Fury, effectively overcoming
Overcoming his height, overcoming his length, his strength, his weight.
His youth, because Tyson Fury's 2 years younger than Usyk. He proved that in spite of all of these disadvantages he has, he's still more skilled.
More skilled than both heavyweight champions. He overcame their size with his skills. And that is what pound for pound is all about.
Now, if you take issue with this, need I remind you that this past weekend, Terence Crawford was watching. A lot of people feel that Terence is number one. Terence Crawford feels that Usyk.
He's in the running. He's in the conversation. He's a legitimate candidate to be ranked at number one because of what he did.
The literal incarnation, the embodiment of what it means to be a pound-for-pound fighter. Now, if you're asking yourself, why is Terence Crawford ranked all the way down there at number 4? Why is he now ranked behind Canelo and Inoue?
Activity.
Or the lack thereof. The last time that Terence Crawford saw action, in July of last year, you know that same week he knew he had a fight, and he's fought 2 times since then.
The fight for Undisputed with Marlon Tapales late last year, and the more recent fight that he had with Luis Neri, a defense of the Undisputed crown. That same logic applies to Canelo.
Canelo fought in May of last year, then Terence fought in July. But then Canelo came back in September, then he came back again in May of this year. He's seen action 2 times, while it's taking Terence Crawford all this time
Activity matters.
to return. That in between the Spence fight and his next fight, these guys are getting busy. They're keeping active, whereas it's taking Terence a long while.
But don't worry.
If he does what he needs to do against Israel Madrimov, he can catch up. And if he does some more after that, he can catch up even more. Maybe he unifies another title at junior middleweight, or I don't know, maybe he moves up to 168, fights Canelo, beats Canelo, kicks him off the list.
Turki Al-Sheikh says he wants to make that fight.
What better way to prove you're a better pound-for-pound fighter than Canelo than by fighting him and beating him? That would be enough for him to move past Inoue and perhaps Alexander Usyk. It all depends.
Depends on what happens next.
For the time being, Terence Crawford is ranked at number 4. 3-division, 2-time lightweight champion Vasyl Lomachenko is ranked at number 7.
Returns to the list.
The rationale being that he's already been a champion in 3 weight classes, 126, 130, and 135. He's already been a champion at 135 before, a unified champion. He's already taken 3 belts from 3 reigning champions.
The WBO from Roman Rocky Martinez at 130, the WBO from Jose Pedraza at 135, and the Ring Magazine and WBA title from Jorge Linares.
Very recently returned to action on the heels of his controversial defeat to Devin Haney, who was recently ejected from the list per the rules that govern it. No fighter coming right off a loss is allowed to maintain a rank, and Devin is coming off a loss.
Loma's coming off a win.
A knockout win over George Cambodia, who had never been knocked out. He's never been stopped. And he's been in there with Teofimo Lopez. He's been in there with Devin Haney. They couldn't stop him. Loma did, to become a 2-time lightweight champion.
Based on his body of work so far, and that he is once again a reigning champion, that's enough to get him in at number 7. Behind Teofimo, but in front of Shakur Stevenson.
These are the current updates to the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. And as I always say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. The list can always change.
And it always does.
So quit your crying and enjoy the ride.